It's the recap show, the recap show. It's time for everyone to come and go to the recap show, the recap show. It's time for me to share what I know. What do you know? Hey, everybody. It's another lovely Thursday here in beautiful Los Angeles, California. I'm glad to be with you. And we have another in our series of DM chats that we've been doing lately. Last week it was random encounters. Today I'm going to talk about yes and when it comes to improv in D&D, and what do I think the limitations and how it's applicable and how it's not specifically applicable. So, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm your host. I'm Tom Lommel, the Dungeon Bastard. And normally we sort of have a recap of what happened on Wednesday night. I hope you got to go back and watch, or I hope you were there for the show. It was a great, fun kind of little one-off thing. We'll be talking more about that later. Let's talk about our agenda today. So, yes and, that's the meat of the issue that we're going to discuss. This came up recently on The Geek and Sundry. Rob Wieland wrote actually what turns out to be a great set of advice for GMs, but it's sort of framed within like, okay, if you're a GM who wants to improvise more, here's the 4 like best rules that you should use. Provocative. Let's dive further, shall we? Yes. We're going to talk about governing authority, balance of authorship, and disservice of cliche. Oh boy, it sounds pretty brutal. Yeah, well, it gets a little conceptual, or at least we're going to talk some structure and intent and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. I think at the end of it, I just want to explain my position on it and how I think yes and doesn't actually intersect particularly well with the experience of playing at the table. So that's that, and then following that, we will recap last night's masquerade. Not so much like a recap of here's everything that happened. You can go back and watch that wherever Saving Throw show near you is sold. But I'd like to recap kind of like the prep, the highlights, kind of how it played out, that sort of thing. We can have a chat about that, and maybe talk a little bit about where it's going, although that's more of a Tuesday topic. So thanks everyone for filtering in and joining me here on this lovely Thursday afternoon. Let's get down to the brass tacks, as it were. I've been saying that a lot lately, and I'm not sure why. It sounds like the landscapers are here. All right, so yes, and as I mentioned, I think it's on. I'm going to see if I can float a link. There's an article on geekandsundry.com. It should be on the homepage. Maybe not. Maybe it's not. Oh, yep, here it is right here. So I'm going to float this into the chat. What's going on? Stop that. No, don't do that. Mouse is acting up. So, maybe the batteries. My mouse actually has a battery. So there we go. There's the article that prompted all of this. And I have to admit full culpability here. I saw this article. I looked at the headlines. I did not really look at the detail in it, and just kind of fired off a thing like, that's what I'm talking about today, because I don't think so. So before anybody gets their torches and pitchforks out, I read the actual article. I recommend reading this article. It's got good advice in it. Let's talk about why I don't think yes and should be championed as much as it is, right? Whenever people talk about oh, I wish I was a better improviser, everybody goes, well, just yes and. Now, one of the reasons that this rankles me is, sure, I hear it thrown around in role-playing circles a little bit. It comes up, it's a popular topic, although it doesn't come up as often as you might think. It just has come up a lot lately. But it also rankles me as an actor, like in my professional life, because you will hear people like, "Oh, they weren't looking for great improvisers. Oh, it's just improv. It's easy. It's just yes and." There's more to it than that. So it's one of the reasons that like my spider sense goes off whenever this, especially this particular phrase, um, comes into a discussion. So let's tackle a couple different things. First of all, I think it's important to realize that yes and is a valuable tool, is sort of a training wheels type of tool. It's a very basic type of tool, and therefore it has some limitations. But more importantly, it's a tool that was created for a specific purpose. Okay? And that purpose was to help fulfill, enhance, facilitate performance-based improv. Okay? That's what it was designed for. That's what it was developed around. That's what it's applied to. And as much as we like to think of our DMing as a performance, it is not performance improv, right? So you are essentially stealing a tool from a different art form and trying to apply it to this medium, okay? In much the same way that we might steal the idea of like, okay, we do a long, slow fade in, we zoom across the horizon line, trees race by until we finally find ourselves perched on the edge of a parapet of a tall white castle, and standing there we can see as a lone silvery bird that's perched on the finger of a woman with long silvery hair. Like, okay, so my point is, using filmic language and inserting that into your game is also a useful tool, but you're using it different purpose. You know, you have to adapt it, right? Doesn't necessarily going to be a one-to-one fit. All right. So let's talk, just, you know, with that in mind, let's do a brief examination of what the purpose of yes and is, and how it does or does not overlap with the experience that we're creating at the table with our players in a D&D game or a tabletop RPG or whatever, right? So, number one, yes and is designed to facilitate the reality, because the reality is constantly being created and established in the course of an improv scene. And it's also designed to avoid pointless conflict. Okay? So what do I mean by that? Essentially, it's designed to avoid negation, right? So if you have any kind of improv training or whatever, one of the guys, that's how to distract me a little bit. If you have any kind of improv training, one of the cardinal sins is negating. So it might be as simple as, you know, if you don't do what I want, I'm gonna shoot you right in the face. And somebody else says, "Why are you holding a banana?" That is a trick that you can pull off in an improv scene. It is sort of a cheap trick, but it is often things like, you know, it's simple like disagreement over the basic facts of reality. Oh, I'm really tired of washing these dishes. Well, why did you put a turtle in there? That's not like, it's hard for me to come up with bad examples of improvisation. But, you know, it's like, do you want a bite of this apple? That's an orange. Okay, well, those things, those are negating statements, right? Those statements are at odds. There's statements where I'm trying to establish one reality and you're fighting me over what it actually is. You're turning it around. And now, in an advanced improviser can take that technique and make that the heart of a scene. But it's very common for beginning improvisers to stumble and fall over this particular aspect. They have their own idea of what's going on, and they start naming stuff and not accepting the offers that are being created by their scene partner or partners, right? And so, yes and is a training wheels technique that teaches you, like, oh, that is a bicycle, and I love the way you've painted it, right? It's designed to lead you to accept the reality that's being established and to embellish it with some additional piece of detail. Now, that detail isn't necessarily meaningful, but the whole heart of what Yes and is built around is to at least get you both on the same page. So what you don't want is, you don't want the audience sitting there and wondering, like, why are they fighting over this? I can't tell whether this is actually an apple or an orange. And since I don't know what it is, and since neither of them know what it is, it doesn't have any meaning to me. There's no way to determine what this thing is. There is, in fact, no governing authority that says this space ball that I have just created is anything other than is anything, period. Right? Unless, of course, the players on the stage jointly agree that this is an apple. And I took a delicious bite out of it. Oh, it's very chewy. It's good. Mm-hmm. Or, actually, this is a tennis ball, and I'm going to throw it across the room and watch it bounce, watch it come back, and, well, now somebody has to get up and go get it, right? But the only governing authority over reality in an improv scene is the consensus that the players form. And if the players have an argument about a piece of reality, they better have a good reason for it. And it certainly better be, it'll certainly be, it has to be better than, that guy's crazy, that's why I'm right. That's also like an age-old fallback. Oh, my grandpa forgot to take his pills again. There he goes. So yes and is expressly developed to create governing authority in a improv scene. And that governing authority is, we're all going to agree that as things get stated, we will acknowledge their reality and adhere to what's been established. Okay, well, what's important about that is that in Dungeons & Dragons, there is a governing authority. It is established by the structure of the game. It is dictated in the rules. In fact, there's an entire book of rules dictated to how that governing authority is carried out. It's called the Dungeon Master's Guide. And regardless of what the players say, the DM has final authority on what actually happens in the world. Now, you can abuse that authority, absolutely. And I would argue it's not a great, fun experience to have the DM's point of view continually inflicted upon you. Obviously, like, there's a give and take, right? But you don't need yes and to keep your audience from wondering, well, what is real? What is this thing? Because the DM goes, oh, that is a piece of very ripe fruit. It is red. It has some purplish spots on it. It's got this strange long vine that comes out from the end, and it smells vaguely of lilacs. Okay, well, guess what? The players can't go, oh, that's actually an orange. It doesn't work that way, right? So you don't need yes and in order to make the audience buy into what's happening, because the DM determines what it is. And if the players go, well, really, that's not what you said before, like, okay, well, now we can have some negotiation. And certainly it's incumbent upon the DM to also accept offers, suggestions, statements that the players give and incorporate them into the reality. But we don't need yes and to create a consensus. over what's true in the fiction, or what's proposed in the fiction, what's apparent in the fiction, right? So that's a huge difference between the function that yes and serves in an improv scene and the function that yes and might serve in a role-playing game, in a tabletop experience. Because if I go, well, what's with that bookshelf? Well, there's a whole set of rules. There's probably an adventure. There's notes, or at least I, as the DM, have an idea of, oh, you go and investigate the bookshelf. Okay, give me an investigation roll. Da, 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 da. And then when I tell you, as the DM, that this is what there's no unreliable narrator, for the most part, in a D&D game. Might be an interesting concept, but it's a dangerous one. It's not a traditional one, right? It's not the way the game is conventionally played, is that the DM is an unreliable narrator. NPCs might be unreliable, but largely the DM is painting the world for you, and you accept on its face that that's the way it is. Yes, and is designed to make sure, it's a rule that makes sure that we all agree, because no one is in charge of what's going on in the world in most traditional improv forms, certainly in the beginner ones. That brings us around to the balance of authorship, right? What does that mean? In an improv scene, everybody is jointly responsible for creating the most interesting scenario possible that can play out in that space at that time, right? We're all listening, we're all ready to jump in, we're all either like stepping in to enhance what's happening, or maybe we're editing the scene to jump forward to a point in time, or maybe we're letting this play out because what's going on stage, we don't have anything that can top what's going on right now, so we're holding back, right? But we're all jointly responsible. That's the way it should be. Shared responsibility between all of the players. It's very rare. It'd be interesting to see a form develop. I mean, you sometimes see this where there's a director of a scene, right? There's an improv director who will actually have more authorship over the scene than necessarily any of the players. You might also see this in short form games where the audience can jump in and ring a bell and change the genre. Okay, give me another genre. Dang, soap opera. Dang, and they can, comedy sports often has like fun kind of rule based type of things that can dictate, well, this is what's going to happen. But in general, in long form improv, which I think is the most applicable to our tabletop experience. In long-form improv, everybody's collectively responsible for what's happening, and everybody's collectively responsible for moving the action forward. Now, it would be very tempting to say, well, that's the way it should be in tabletop RPGs also. And I don't believe that's the practical reality. The balance of authorship is not evenly distributed amongst everyone at the table. The balance of authorship, the responsibility for propelling the story in new and interesting ways, for creating a world and space that is engaging and inspiring, lies very heavily with the GM, the DM, right? And the rest, and the players, sure, they should play a role. They have a very important role to play. But the responsibility, the great weight of authorship rests on the DM. And oftentimes, your players are there to have fun, shoot the crap, roll some dice, kill some goblins. They can lay back, right? And one of the reasons that we don't have more DMs is because honestly the DM very rarely can just lay back and let stuff happen. Sure, if the players are like, okay, well, what's your what's your plan for the next day? After you make camp, what's your plan for the next day? Are you going to go try and explore the broken tower at the top of the mountain, or do you want to deal with this cave that you have got this map for, or that wasn't marked on your map that you stumbled across? And then the DM can kind of sit back and like, I don't know, I don't have any stake in the outcome. You know, I mean they do, but like they can let the players talk amongst themselves, right? But for the most part, I need to like be thinking about like, okay, well, if they, all right, so if they go down this, where, what happens if they go into the cave? Then, and oh yeah, it's right on that tower. There's a, you know, I'm sitting, I'm processing, I'm listening. The responsibility for what happens in reality rests with the GM, and a good GM accepts suggestions and offers and inspiration from the players. They're not beholden to their own notes or their own personal preconception of what the storyline has to be. It's not foreordained. But ultimately, it is the DM's responsibility, if those suggestions are going to come in, to take them, process them, incorporate them, remix them, reflect them, and then shoot them, like, and represent them. Not just represent, but represent them back to the players. I'm showing pretty good internet today, so if you're having problems with the stream, I suspect it might be on your end. I don't have any dropped frames. I've had 0 dropped frames, as a matter of fact. Don't jinx me. So the balance of authorship rests with the DM in a way that it does not rest with one person in an improv structure. Okay? Another thing that I want to say about this is that yes and is built on it's built on the idea that anyone can add information at any time, and that their contribution is just as meaningful and as valuable as every single one that's come before it, right? Like, that's the fundamental tenet of Yes and, is there's no throwaway facts, there's no details that should be dismissed. We're continually amassing more and more and more information. And when you look at the role of the DM in terms of he's the final arbiter, well, number one, that idea starts to go out the window, because I as the DM have to accept what you throw at me. And if you say, oh, well, it just so happens that I have this flaming sword and I'm going to set the barn on fire. If I haven't given you a flaming sword, now all of a sudden our roles within the narrative structure come into conflict. Because my job is to be the arbiter of the reality, and you're introducing this piece of reality that doesn't exist, that I've not okayed, that I've not approved, right? There is actually, you know, you're inserting yourself into my realm of responsibility, my sphere of influence, right? Now, I can be cool about that, but ultimately it's up to me as the DM in the game, the way it's traditionally structured, if that's my purview. So for the player to cross that line is changing the dynamic, right? In improv, you see 2 hayseeds standing in a bar, and one guy says, well, I'm going to take my flaming sword and burn this place down. Boom! He's got a flaming sword. That's just the way it is, right? Also important to keep in mind that in an improv scene, no matter, really, there's very few instances where an improv scene exists beyond its 20 minutes or whatever it is of life. Could be 5, 7, 20, like however long that scene is, it generally only exists in that bubble. if it maybe exists within a larger context, so if it exists within, I'm going to get a little technical. If it exists within a herald, then it might be called back in that herald. Those characters might recur. But then when that thing is done, like part of the nature of improv is a lot of it is just gone. Now, sure, if you watched, Dungeons and Dragons: The Improvised Campaign, there are certain elements and characters and story. That's a serialized improv. That is largely the exception, right? But therefore, when I create this sort of disposable reality, I have huge leeway. And it does not matter so much that, like, I'm going to say something outrageous, like I'm a hayseed with a flaming sword. Great. That we can explore that concept for the next 11 minutes, and then when that set is over and we're all at the bar having a beer, we're talking about, oh yeah, that was really funny how that hayseed had a flaming sword. That was cool. If you then, a week later, went and did a scene where you're like, my name's Billy Bob and this is my flaming sword, everybody's like, we've seen this. What? That's not improv. What are you doing? So keep in mind that you're working with a tool that was developed for very very ephemeral, disposable types of performances, types of experiences, right? Yes and isn't really designed around the idea of everything that's said in an improv scene keeps building upon itself, and the next time that you improv, you have to take all this crap from before and import it and expand upon it, and import it and expand upon it, etc., right? Estelle Castillo says, I like inviting the players to contribute when building social environments. There's an open air market. You see this, you see this, you see this. What else do you see? That is a great technique. I'm a huge fan of that technique, right? In that case, you were asking the players to yes and you as the GM. I've established this. I've established that there's a merchant who sells camels. I've established that there is a bakery. I've established that there is a skeezy looking guy who's selling knickknacks. What else would you see there? Okay, well that's great, but you inviting the players in is different than everyone jointly saying, oh, okay, like everyone having the same way. Like I said again, you are letting them have some influence, and you ultimately have veto power, or at least editing rights, over whatever they suggest. I see. We see a robot who's peeing in a tin bucket. Okay, well, this is a Dark Sun campaign that has, number one, there's no metal, so you wouldn't be able to construct a robot. I mean, like, you can find a reason to accept that suggestion, but also you are not obligated to accept suggestions which fly in the face of the premise which you've established, which you have authorial control over, right? So this brings me to the next point I want to make. I don't know if this brings me to this next point or not, but yes and is about sharing and embellishing, right? And creating as much, not necessarily creating as much detail as possible, but definitely like everyone adds more detail. I want you to think about the fact that Dungeons and Dragons, really most traditional RPGs at their core are not about freely creating and sharing information. They are about withholding and distributing information, right? I don't sit down at the beginning of an adventure and tell the players, okay, so there's 35 kobolds, 2 ogres, a pair of zombies, and a spectator. It's going to fool you. It might look like a beholder. Don't worry, it's not a beholder. It's just a spectator. It only has 4 eye stalks. There's 3 secret doors, and at the end of this thing, you're going to find a +2 longbow that has this special property where it always, like when the first arrow that you shoot always flies north at the first arrow of the day. I don't create all of that stuff and then share it openly and freely with the players. Instead, I start with some engaging hints about what might be going on. I give you some teasers, some hooks to pull you in. Oh, you've heard rumors of a ranger who went missing in the Elsember Hills, and as of late, it has been besieged by a band of vicious goblins who have been using tactics no one has heard before. They're far more coordinated. They're using far more advanced poison than any known goblin tribes have ever employed. What do you want to do? Now, I've given them enough detail. It's like, oh, okay, this ranger went missing. Oh, he's this famous. What? The next question might be, what do we know about this guy? Oh, well, it turns out he was an expert tracker and a huntsman. And in fact, one of the things that's strange for him to go missing is that he was known to never have gone lost. Oh, really? Oh, wow. Why was he so great? Well, it's rumored that his bow, when fired, the first arrow, blah, blah, like, right? The point being, the structure of an RPG, the structure of a D&D session, is to build up this reservoir of interest and then slowly just keep leaking facts or hints into the player's atmosphere, so they go, oh, wait a minute, what about that? Well, let's ask about that. Let's follow up on that. And so they're following kind of, they're pulling at the threads that you're putting out. So contrary to, one of the things we would say in improv is the character knows everything. You don't have to ask. Oh, is that your balloon? You don't have to ask that. The character always knows. It's far more interesting and engaging for the audience to go, no, at least they got you nice balloons for your birthday. Great, now we went somewhere cool and specific, and I just stated a fact. I drove it home. But you know what? You don't want the audience asking a lot of questions in an improv scene. Although you do want them to be like, oh, I see what's happening. I think I understand what's happening here, and then be surprised when either they figure it out or, oh, there was a twist I didn't see coming. But D&D is not about... D&D is about creating compelling questions and then following them wherever they go. Ultimately, it should be following them to some sort of challenge, which they then overcome in a satisfying manner, which earns them a reward. That's the fundamental nature of the experience, right? So rather than everyone collaboratively creating information, it's about one person very deliberately withholding some information, slowly dispersing it. That's the opposite of improv. You don't want to have secrets from the other players on stage. At least not in a one direction. I don't know. That's a weird statement. Let me just scrub that from the record. I'm not sure. Having secrets on stage has some benefit to it, but that's an edge case, and it's not worth getting into. Or at least it's an advanced technique. So the final thing that I want to cover in this particular topic is the disservice of cliche, and it goes back to something I said at the top of the stream when I was introducing this topic, which is yes and is extremely cliched advice, and it's very loosely thrown around, and it's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like people saying, well, do a juice cleanse, right? Oh, you just do a juice cleanse. It's common sense. Come on. Is it common sense? Maybe that's not the right metaphor. Let me put it this way. It's thrown around, but I don't think it's as easy to practice as people seem to think, right? I think that there are a couple problems. Number one, it puts you on the spot. Okay, now I feel obligated to accept whatever the players say, even though I'm the DM, I'm the arbiter of what happens. Okay, well I'm gonna yes and this. And then everybody's staring at you, and you're like, well, we're improvising right now. I gotta say something. It better be. I'm gonna add a detail. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety, and I can tell you from experience that pressure and anxiety do not lead you to very many fruitful places when you're improvising. I think it is very vague advice. Just yes and them. Just yes and, just now what does yes and mean? Does that mean drill further down into the detail that's been established? This is an apple. Yes, and it has this vine that comes from the top. Yes, and the vine has little mistletoe buds on it, little red berries on it. Yes, and those little red berries, if you were to squeeze one in half, there would be a little wriggling worm inside. Yeah, and if you cut the worm in half, it turns into two worms, and they both burrow into your skin. Like, that can be an interesting game that leads you places. But what if your adventure's not about apples? It can also lead you into creating a bunch of extraneous detail. This is an apple. Yes, and this is a pink banana. Yes, and over here we have orange grapefruit that are warm to the touch. Okay, well now I've got three different things. If I can unify them into a theme, like, oh, there's a weird fruit here, great. But if I'm not looking with that clarity of purpose in mind, now I'm just naming a bunch of weird fruit, which can be entertaining, but does not provide us necessarily with a compelling direction or lead to follow. And it does not set up the foundation or further an established narrative arc. The key struggle anytime you're watching an improv show is you never want to be sitting there asking yourself, why am I watching this? And that's what most of the rules of improv are designed to avoid. To keep the audience engaged enough that they think they know what's going on, and they're not asking themselves, why do I care? Why am I watching this? Why does it matter? Apparently it's all just made up, so there are no stakes. No, we have joint consensus about what all these things mean, and this person reacts in an honest and heartfelt manner when this person changes the given circumstance or raises the stakes on what's happening. Oh, okay, well, those people all care about this, then, okay, well, I want to see what she's going to do when he throws that thing, whatever it is. They get engaged in the situation. They care because the people on stage care. So many rules of improv are designed to keep you from bad improv, from a bad theatrical experience. Me as an audience member asking myself why I care. Now, you don't want to have that experience in your D&D game either. Right? But hopefully there's enough fundamentals presented to you that you're not going to have that issue. Why do the players care? Oh, well, they want to find that bow. They want to find that ranger. They want to protect their village. They want to recover the thing that was stolen. Those are 4 different reasons why you might go on the same adventure. Well, hopefully that's there for you. And at its heart, because there's no audience, because we're all engaging in the experience, it could be as simple as, I want to roll dice, kill stuff, and become more powerful. Now that is your weakest motivation for engaging in this face-to-face experience, but it's there for you. It's this tremendous hook. It is one of the greatest assets of D&D, is the level system. I start off with almost no power until I gradually amass, oh, wait. That carrot in the, not even a carrot in the stick, but just that delayed gratification, the Skinner box thing of like, feed you another food pellet, hit that bar, hit that bar, ding! Oh, we leveled up. Yeah! Hit that bar. Oh, I got a sword. Oh, this thing is cool. Are you kidding? I say this word Inflarno. it catches fire, and I can shoot like little miniature fireballs across the room. Ah, it's awesome! Hit that bar, hit that bar, hit that bar, hit that bar. So XP, treasure, and gold, equipment, spells, and power, increased abilities, these are all hooks that keep the players engaged, at least on a fundamental level, right? In a way that performative improv doesn't have that hook. Nobody goes, oh, well, I've now watched 300 XP worth of improv, and I'm a level 2 improv audience member, right? It just doesn't mean anything. So I think my gut reaction, why I have this visceral kind of like ugh reaction to, hey, just yes and, is it's actually the improper tool for the situation. It's designed for a completely different purpose, and it's so vague that without practice you will not use it correctly. And this kind of ties into our discussion about random encounters, right? Random encounters are a really vague mechanic within D&D. And people find them compelling because they've created the reason that makes it compelling for them. It's an improv opportunity for the DM. It's a way to change the pace of what's happening at a session. And it's a way to raise the stakes on or put pressure on the party as they're traveling or heading into danger, etc. All of those things are valid, and every DM uses them for that purpose at some time or another. But on their face, random encounters don't actually fulfill those functions very well, those specific functions very well. Same thing with yes and. It's this vague tool that if you practice with it enough, does lead you to being a better GM, but you will quickly dispense with big pieces of yes and because the fundamental play experience at the table is structured so differently than an improv performance and the rules and structures around a long-form improv performance. In closing, I would suggest that you practice things like saying, no, but. Okay, no, that doesn't happen, but here's what you find out. Okay, well, that didn't work, but. So you create interesting outcomes based on failures. As I've said before, it's easy to create interesting outcomes based on spectacular success. When you roll a critical hit, we can all think of something cool that might happen when you bash that two-headed troll with your warhammer. But generally in RPGs, specifically in D&D, we are not often challenged to think about what happens when you roll a 6 against that troll or that two-headed giant or whatever. Oh, okay, well, that didn't work, but you find yourself in a better position when you circle around next round. You might have advantage because I think you'll be able to attack the guy. You found your way to higher ground or whatever, right? So use no but. Certainly, if you look at that article, it gives you some great advice about be willing to accept suggestions and offers that your players give you. They're valuable. Your players often have better ideas than you do. You've got 5 brains working against your 1. The hive mind will come up with something better than what you planned. Be willing to embrace that. Or more importantly, be willing to incorporate that. Pick the parts that you like. The remix, change, distort, bend, deflect. Make it mesh with whatever you had planned. Build upon it. So there's value in that advice, but I think the way the term is thrown around, it's the wrong tool for the wrong job, and it's easily misinterpreted. And I think there are better ways for you to become a more free-flowing, improvisational DM than to go, well, why don't I should just yes and more. My advice to you is either ahead of time as you're prepping your session, and we've done this together, or in the moment when you're faced with a situation where you're like, oh, this calls on some improv, ask yourself one of two questions. What's the coolest possible thing that could happen next? Or what's the most dramatic thing that could happen next? And when you can find that coolest possible outcome and the most dramatic, which might be handing the players a loss, then you begin to see, you peel those things open, you begin to see the array of possibilities in between. And that's when you truly become free to be an improvisational DM that responds in a plausible way, that maintains the balance of authorship, that sits as the governing authority, and yet is a partner with the players in creating this really cool, gripping, and engaging story. Christian Linky says, why do you keep recommending adding a human element to gaming? That's right. What are the players there for? We could just use an AI, you guys. Most of Dungeons and Dragons can be played on my iPad alone in the bathroom. All right. So that is my 45-minute lecture on the role of yes and as it applies to being a DM, being a more improvisational, mostly being more of an improvisational DM. Does it really apply to being a player? Oof, boy. I mean, the thing is, as a player, you're yes-anding all the time, right? Because you're accepting the reality, the facts that are being, the quote-unquote facts that are being established by the DM, and then you're building upon them. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. So there's this tower up there. All right, great. Well, we're going to climb the side of the mountain. Oh, it's very rocky. Okay, great. It's very rocky. I have pitons, and I have a climbing hook and a rope, and I throw that up there. Oh, okay, great. And then you make your climbing checks. Like, as a player, you're constantly in a state of yes and, but you don't need to put it that way because it's straightforward. It's obvious on its face. Like, oh, I'm going to accept what he says. Really without question. The DM is not an unreliable narrator, and I'm going to respond and react and build upon it. So, there we go. I do want to talk a little bit about about last night's game. I thought, for those of you who did not tune in, we had a one-shot. We had Lisette sit in. We had Jesse Hendricks sit in, and they played a pair of sorority sisters of Avrils from the Thieves Guild, and I thought there were some great moments in there last night. It was the perfect session for what they wanted, right? For like what that situation called for, especially in terms of, as we talked about, where we had been in the game in terms of a really heavy role-playing session, and before that a really big combat session, and this was just a nice, like a piece of fairy cake, just like, oh, take this, do this, have fun. I thought that worked really well. I thought giving them characters that were unorthodox, making one of them a werebear in particular, really paid off. I thought it also giving Lisette the opportunity to play a sprite was gave her role-playing hooks that were right there that she could immediately bite into. And the same thing with Jesse and playing the werebear type character, right? So why not give those guest people the chance to play something fantastic, as opposed to giving them something more conventional and them going, all right, so wait a minute, now how do my spells work? What does this thing do? How does that, if you're a werebear, you don't need to know anything other than I turn into a bear and then I punch stuff, I growl. You know what a bear is, right? You don't need the game mechanics defined for you. Whereas if it said Tensor's floating disk, you'd be like, oh, come on, Jesus Christ. Okay, so who's Tensor? All right, that's a long story. Floating disk. So is it like a frisbee type of thing that I can float around, wing around, and I use it like a throwing star? No, it is not an offensive spell whatsoever. Okay, well now you just number one, alienated the player. Number two, disappointed them on, like, they got all excited about what their idea of it was, and you're like, no, actually, it doesn't work like that. Especially for a new player, for a one-shot. Why? Why? Like, get them engaged in the realm of the imagination first, and then down the road, when they've got more D&D under the belt, you can start them off on the whole, like, well, you're just a lowly hobbit, and you have 4 hit points, and you're out to go make your way in the world and see if you can gain power and treasure. Oh, okay, fun. But for a one-shot session, ugh, God, no. I thought the reveal that this was actually like a Thieves Guild test was fun. I thought it could have been enhanced more. I thought it could have had a bigger payoff. I wish it was getting late and I kind of ran out of gas, but I wish that I had paid off the promise of whoever has the watch at the end of the night is like the class hero of the Thieves Guild. I think we still have time to pay that off, but I wish I was like, I was just trying to wrap it up. It was like almost 11:30. I was like, okay, let's push to the end here and kind of get it over with. So I think I could have paced it up a little bit more. It was interesting to me that they decided to just skip what were basically the 2 big physical skill challenges. No, we don't want to do the acrobatic feats of trying to climb these rings of fire and whatnot. And no, we don't want to climb the climbing wall of the tower and whatnot. Shimmickson says, were the players supposed to get to all of the tasks? So the great thing about this particular structure in terms of awarding them raffle tickets, and that was a great prop. Like, I'm glad I spent the $8 to get the raffle tickets because it gave them something tangible and meaningful. And if I had said, like, okay, well, you get 3 and you get 15, well, now it seems like it has it has stakes to it. It has physical weight in the world. Where if I just said, all right, you get 3 and you get 15, then it'd be like, well, that's not nice. How many do you have? Oh, I have 9. Well, I have 21. Oh, okay. But if you're like, oh, I have 9, and that guy has 21, you're like, he's got twice as much as I have. So the great thing, just to more directly answer your question, the great thing about this was they were raffle tickets. So you could have participated in one event and spent the rest of the night like BSing with all the nobles and dealing with whatever, da-da-da-da-da, and you could have still, theoretically within the world of fiction, won what you needed to win, right? So it was not a winner-take-all where we have to defeat all of the other, competitors. It's just to our advantage to defeat as many as we can. And I had enough events for them to do all, extra stuff. The target thing was the pinwheel, the puffball pinwheel or whatever it was. That was deliberately set up for Garav's character to be the superstar there. Good. He's surrounded by these 3 essentially kind of thieves. Like, let's give him a moment to shine. But no, do they have to do all of them? No. And that was the beauty of that particular adventure structure was when I get tired, when it gets to be 11 o'clock, ding, 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 I can ring the bell. The bell tolls midnight. And guess what, Cinderella? We're going to have the closing ceremonies here, right? So that's... were they supposed to? No. Could they have? Yes. But I don't know. I really... I like how open-ended it is. I think I could have done a better job of painting different pieces of the world and different interactions that were happening behind the scenes so that they might have gotten into more of the, okay, well, what's this whole Thieves Guild challenge all about? And who's doing what? And where's what? but they didn't really hook into it very much, and they were far more focused on like, let's have fun doing these different challenges. So it was not designed to be this sort of intrigue style game where like, oh, let's lift the curtain on what's really going on at this big charity masquerade. It could have been that, but in this case, the way that they approached it, it wasn't. It was just an easygoing, fun night of, let's do some role-playing challenges, let's give each other crap, let's have some fun together, and, you know, win a raffle at the end of the night, and do a dance-off, and that's that. So that's where it was. I think it was a good session. Sure, it could have been better. It could have been a little more polished, but I'm happy with the unconventional character choices. I was happy with the modular nature of the encounters, where you can plug in as many as you want. You can dump out the ones that they're not interested in. And I loved, you know, the idea that we jointly came up together was that there's this Thieves Guild graduation challenge going on behind the scenes underneath the whole thing. Yeah, overall I thought it was a very successful night, and I honestly like struggle with one shots in terms of trying to make them the right size, trying to flesh the concept out enough that the players can like hook in and grab the reins and kind of ride it down to its conclusion. And I think in this particular case it worked. Like there was a payoff, and not just a payoff, but like there was enough prep there that they were like engaged and had fun exploring it, and it didn't need to be more than it was, and it was what it was, and they got some extra information about it. But more importantly, we all got to sit around, do some riddles, roll some dice, do some silly stuff, and have fun. And that was 100% the function and purpose of that session for that week. Next week, we're going to go back into a little more kind of grim, gritty, okay, dungeon crawly, where does this go? What happens? What are the consequences? Da-da-da-da-da. What about tax parents? The mayor, etc., 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 right? So we'll get back into the ongoing sort of soap opera, or at least the serialized drama of our campaign. But this was a terrific kind of little one-stop shop, kind of a little breath of fresh air that took us to a new place here. So, all right. Speaking of next week, let's take a look at our calendar and see what's on the docket. So tonight is Mr. David Crennan, who recently celebrated his birthday. Maybe we'll celebrate it again some more tonight. Tonight at 8 o'clock, it's Star Wars Edge of the Empire. Never tell me the odds. It is Star Wars. It is another one-shot Star Wars for policemen. I don't remember what the tagline was. I saw he posted it in our Saving Throw stuff. There's like 4 cops on Coruscant, 0 clean hands, or something like that. So it's another entry in the standalone kind of Star Wars noir thing that Mr. David Crennan has been pursuing. Tomorrow night, it is Black Bag Vikings Call of Cthulhu with the ever talented, ever inventive Mr. Wes Otis. So see what those intrepid medieval investigators are up to. And then this weekend, as was mentioned earlier on Twitter, Masks is canceled at the moment. We'll see if we can get something else to fly in on Saturdays for your gaming enjoyment. So other than that, of course, just stay tuned on Twitter for all the excitement. Amy is at San Diego Comic-Con. So is Eric Reichert. He's there too. I will not be there. As you can tell, I'm here in my apartment in Los Angeles and don't have any real intention of going down. And here's the thing. I go to Gen Con every year. Gen Con this year looks like it's going to be just bursting at the seams. They've sold out all of the 4-day passes. They've sold out all of Saturday. They're on the verge of selling out all of Sunday. Gen Con is not going to let up this year, and that's some 60 to 70,000 people, and that's enough for me. So if you look at Comic-Con, their numbers tend to be around like 170 to 180, and I am not interested. No, no, thank you. I will pass. Maybe one day I'll go down there if I get cast in something where I can be part of a panel or whatever. But for now, it's just not something that holds a lot of interest for me. I'm happy to consume my nerd news diligently by sipping from the stream of social media. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for dropping by the stream today. It was a great chat. I appreciate all of your time and attention. I appreciate your comments and discussion. Anytime you chip in, I really appreciate that. Thanks to Farquaad, of course, as always, for modding for us today, and thanks to all of our regulars and all of our Patreon backers. I'll try to get some notes together. Honestly, I don't think that I can share much from last night. It's part of a different project that I am working on, which will be coming out sometime soon, which is about all that I can say about that. So I hope you enjoyed last night. You may see it further edited and altered in some other format sometime in the very near future. So there you go. Thanks so much for joining us, and until next time, hey, let's dungeon. Oh, that was kind of a sexy one. Let's dungeon. Hey, let's dungeon. Hey, let's dungeon. Let's dungeon. More voices. Needs more voices.